Welcome back, my friends, to the Courageous Pivot podcast. Thank you so much for being here. Today is another special guest. They're all exquisitely special superhumans. Dr. Julie Ponesse is joining me for a very important conversation about personal ethics and what happens when you need to or have to make exquisitely challenging pivots in your life to live in alignment with your personal moral compass and your own ethics. Julie Ponesse is a mother, author, and former ethics professor at Western University who was terminated with cause for refusing to comply with the pandemic-era vaccine mandates. Since then, she's emerged as a strong voice in the public intellectual space, serving as an ethics scholar for the Democracy Fund, chief of bioethics for the Wellness Company, and the creator of The Hero's Journey, a 6-month course and community designed to help people build lives rooted in integrity. She's also the author of 2 powerful books, My Choice and Our Last Innocent Moment. Earlier this year, she made a bold and unexpected pivot, once again, beginning the process of becoming a licensed financial broker. While the transition from ethics to finance may seem surprising from the outside, as we discussed in our conversation, it is actually perfectly in alignment with first helping her and then supporting others in finding ways to have more freedom and autonomy in their lives. Julie and I go deep into a conversation about what it looks like to pivot when it is not of your own choosing, not of your own free will, but in many ways forced upon you. We spend a lot of time in understanding that messy middle ground of what was left behind, the gifts that have come, and also the challenge of navigating all of this with a newborn baby. I trust that you will be touched by this conversation. And something that we did talk about, which has resonated with me still as I'm recording this intro after we've done our interview, was the idea that Julie talks about caring less about what people think about what she says, what she does, and those repercussions. And I have to say that I'm on the same page. Many of the conversations we're having on this podcast are ones that I would not have been brave enough to have 3 years ago, even 1 year ago. As you build up this resilience in a freedom of alignment life, you become freer to go deeper into topics that are challenging to some people without worrying as much about what will happen. I trust that the people who are ready to hear this, who want to hear it, and who will be touched by it, will hear it. And so without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Julie Ponesse. Welcome to the Courageous Pivot podcast. I am super honored to have you here.
It's very nice to be here, Meghan. Thank you so much.
I'm quite honestly a little bit nervous. And, from when I first saw your writing and followed your story, I've just been so inspired by the grace in which you've pursued and moved through something that has been profoundly, I can't even imagine how challenging it was for you, but, many of us were experiencing similar challenges in our own realm, but yours was very public.
Mm-hmm.
So let's begin. You were an ethics professor for 20 years at Western University. Can we just start by how someone becomes an ethics professor?
So I was an ethics professor 20 years in total, taught at different universities in Canada and the US. And then at Western, I was there for about 8 years. So how somebody becomes an ethics professor is you basically major in philosophy in undergrad, and then you decide you like it so much you can't possibly stop studying. So I went on to do my master's, and that was not enough, apparently. When I did my master's, I did a collaborative program in bioethics as well. So that's when the bioethics part came along. Loved it so much. And it's funny because a big part, if not the main part of what I loved about academia was so much, was the free thinking aspect of it. It really felt at the time like you could sit around a table with really bright, interesting people from different political orientations, different religious perspectives, different genders, different histories, and have a conversation that was not first and foremost ideological. So I loved that about it. It always seemed like you could raise any question, put an idea on the table, as long as you were being respectful and you could just explore that idea. And that felt so free and so beautiful. So I went on to do my PhD, and then I specialized in ancient ethics and contemporary ethics, doing that. And then once I had my PhD, I started applying for academic jobs, got some, and then I was teaching ethics and ancient at the same time.
When
So,
did you feel that shift start to happen where conversations became far more ideological?
really good question. I've asked myself this many times because the whole 2021 thing, when I got terminated for refusing to comply with the mandates, but also largely because I was making a big public fuss about it, right? That really caught me off guard. When they were talking about introducing the mandates, I thought, no, 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 this is never going to fly at universities, because universities are about autonomy. That's one of the pillars of bioethics, and surely universities of all places know that, even if maybe government and businesses in the private sector don't. So I was very caught off guard by that, which means that I wasn't conscious of a shift
Right.
going
Right.
into it. But of course, then I had to think back and think, well, this just happened in 2021, which would be a bit strange, for it just to kind of come out of nowhere. Or what was more likely is that there were signs, there were smaller steps before that. And I think there were, for sure. One thing that was very noticeable in my discipline, and I think probably others as well, is when there were advertisements for new professors being published, they always said women and visible minorities are especially encouraged to apply. And I thought, well, why? Why would they be especially encouraged to apply for a position teaching philosophy of physics or the history of Renaissance art? I mean, why in the world does that matter? So that was definitely a shift. There was definitely a shift in terms of the professors that were hired to replace the baby boomers. So people that were maybe sort of 5, 10 years older than I am now, starting in the early 2000s, very different in kind. They would start saying things in class like, well, we can't touch that idea, or that's a settled idea. So very much kind of the academic equivalent of judicial notice, right? It's, nope, that's settled. We don't tread on that anymore. And to raise it as a live open question is disrespectful, right? So there were signs for sure, but I didn't realize them until I started reflecting after the trauma and the drama, right?
Yeah, I had a similar experience in my own business, which was a small business, but I would be hiring younger people who would
Mm.
come in, and I never thought of myself as old or out of touch. And they would come in and say, like, well, we can't use that language, or we should be adding this or that to our signatures or doing, and I was like, really? Like, matters? Like, that seems so insignificant or inconsequential.
Well, the thing that's shocking is that they seem to want it to matter even when it doesn't matter, right? So surely, yes, we don't want to make race an issue when it shouldn't be an issue. We don't want to discount someone for being Black or female or disabled when that's irrelevant to the work that they're going to do. But we also don't want to make it hyper relevant. And that's when I think we started, probably you and I both started to notice this hyper wokeism, where it was all about ideas that were entrenched and unquestionable. And that's when I think, like, a public intellectual life just died, just went out of existence, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I started noticing it when I was just posting general health information, like about metabolic disorders or diseases and increasing risk of negative outcomes when you have them. And then I was accused of fat shaming. I was like, this is biological fact. Like, it's inarguable. And at that point, I sort of, you know, was like, well, I'm going to lose no matter what, so let's go all in.
As well, yes,
There,
right.
there's no arguing with ideology when it fully competes with the reality of whether it's biology or just the fact of we are all humans. So take me back to when you realized. So because we haven't said explicitly, you worked for Western. They were bringing in the vaccine mandates for the COVID-19 vaccines, where you were no longer able to enter the campus if you were not fully vaccinated. At what point, I guess, did you realize like that medical intervention was not a fit for you?
Mhm.
and what sort of transpired once you were aware that you weren't going to accept this medical intervention and it was going to cost you your career?
Good question with a complicated answer. So, I had been working with the Canadian COVID Care Alliance for quite a while before the fall of 2021. So, I was in touch with a lot of doctors in Canada mostly who were exposing the harms with the COVID vaccine. So I felt very confident about my decision at that point. However, of course, there was something that drew me to work with them in the first place because I guess I had my own doubts. But what makes this answer complicated is that I would have objected to the mandate even if I either took the vaccine or felt that it was perfectly safe and effective, which I don't. But hypothetically, if I had felt that way, I would have objected to the mandate. So that it was very important to me that I, and hopefully others who felt called to do so, made a stand against a university of all places saying your own critical thinking and intuition and self-reflection about what is going to go into your body and potentially affect not just your physical life, your mental life, your future fertility, your children's fertility, your mortality, all of these things. That is not for you to decide. That's not even for you to think about or question or have discussions about on campus. And whether it was about a COVID vaccine, any vaccine, a dietary intervention, a change in the air quality in a building, or what kind of trees to put on campus, whatever it was about, if it was this is a lockdown issue that you as a member of the campus community don't have a say in, that has the potential to significantly affect your life, that, if for no other reason, warranted objection.
Were you able to bring, I mean, you were a bioethics professor, like this is your domain.
Mm-hmm.
Were you able to, did you have time to bring this conversation into your class?
No, because so I was on maternity leave, coincidentally, at the same time that the whole campus was shut down. So we stopped going to class in March of 2020 because we weren't allowed to go to campus anymore. And then I had expected to be on maternity leave for a year. And then just over a year comes around when I thought I'd be going back to work in September 2021. And that's when this kind of came to a head. So there was no opportunity to have a discussion with students or even to see how their thinking shifted. I was wholly shocked. I thought there would have been massive objection to this. And what I got from students was, I just want to make clear that no one associates me with you and your thinking. And goodness, when would this have been? We had a rally. So Matt Strauss and myself were invited to speak at Western. Some of the students organized it on the concrete beach, which is kind of the main outdoor gathering area. I'm thinking maybe 2022, in defense of the students, and hardly any showed up,
Wow. What was going through your mind before those final days when you realized, like, I'm not accepting this and this is going to be the repercussion? Were you in acceptance at that point?
that I was going to lose my job and my life was going to change.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, did you think it was temporary? Did you like,
Yeah, I think so. It was very hard to believe that what was happening was actually happening, that the psychosis was so widespread. I mean, the president of our university had a massive coronary event. I mean, I shouldn't laugh about this, but the irony of these, but no, I don't think. I think in the thick of it all, 2021 going into 2022, I thought, surely, and especially in the face of so much sickness and catastrophe medically for so many. I mean, I heard story after story of students, professors with basically vaccine injury. I never would have thought the appropriate reaction was, well, those clearly are not connected, right? And it's been a process now, a few years later, of understanding that unraveling this kind of darkness and blindness that we're in is going to take a long time. I still know many people in the freedom community who think that we're all collectively, globally going to wake up any minute now. I think it's going to be a very long time. And so that's informed a lot of decisions that I'm making, because it's not just a matter of, well, I'll just go into the bunker for a while until it passes and then I can emerge back into the life I had. I don't, and a lot of people are taking that approach. But I think what got us here is very deeply woven into families and our culture and now our biology. And it's going to take a long time, right? There's been a lot of harm done by people who thought of themselves as good, right? And a long time and that's moral injury, right? So I actually just did a set of stories on Instagram yesterday about moral injury, about how we've been hurt over the last 4 or 5 years, not just psychologically and emotionally, but in our ability to be moral agents, our ability to trust and be patient and have empathy. And I certainly feel broken in all those ways. There's been a lot of growth also. I feel much more self-confident and more clear thinking. I make decisions more quickly because it's more obvious what matters to me, and then all the distracting minutia fades away pretty quickly. But I also have a much lower tolerance for challenging social situations, for gaslighting, for people who maintain that they didn't do anything wrong when people's lives were shattered by the treatment of them. It's so coming to terms, though, with the fact that you pressured people to do something that has literally ruined their lives when you thought of yourself as a kind, thoughtful, generous, sensitive person.
Yeah, that's more undoing than I believe most people are even willing to face, and the revisionist history so that they can remain good and right in their own minds and their own hearts is, exquisitely powerful. It's that holy attachment to the ego that will not quit. Because then what? Then that undoes the whole foundation, potentially, of which they've built their lives, or having to face the absolute consequences of, for lack of a better word, being wrong in their righteousness.
Yeah, it's so tribal,
Yes.
right? It goes back to our ancient roots of we need to be right in order not to make the group vulnerable. And if we're wrong, then we become the plague, on the group that's infecting everyone. And we know that the consequence of that is to be excised, to be ostracized. And our deep fear for most of us is that, right? It's to be left alone in the wilderness, to try to fend for ourselves and to be outside of community. And all of that is a lot to come to terms with, when it is so much easier. This is how we get these defense mechanisms evolving. It's so much easier to pretend it didn't exist and hope no one else remembers either.
Yeah. My husband and I would play a game with each other, like, under what circumstances would you be willing to accept this thing? Because for you and for us and for so many people, from the outside, they're like, just, you're inconveniencing yourself. Like, just get the thing. It's fine. And most people I'm speaking to on this podcast took their courageous pivot because out of their own free will, ultimately, like following their heart and making a hard choice, but it was their own choice. Your pivot you had to make was not, it was your choice in some respect, but ultimately it was not your choice. There was no other way except to abandon what you had done for so many years and what was your identity.
Yes. Very often we see this language, I couldn't have done otherwise. I had no choice. But that doesn't tell the whole story, because sometimes when people say that, what they mean is, I was so overwhelmed by what was expected of me that I couldn't possibly stand up for what I really wanted to do. And whether it's fear, right? I was just far too afraid of losing my job or financial security or friendship, or I just succumbed to peer pressure or the thought of being conspicuous, right? And so they'll say, well, I had no choice. And what they really mean is, I had a choice, but the choice to stand up for myself and do what I thought was right was not live enough. The relative strength of that against this beast, this bully, right? That was telling you, you better do this or else these consequences are going to befall you. And you anticipate, and you think, I couldn't possibly handle it. But sometimes what people mean when they say I had no choice is, no, I know I had a choice. But if I was going to stay in alignment with who I am, if I was going to live with myself, if I was not going to have this crisis of conscience, then this is what I have to do. And that's what I mean by, so I think it depends on what was compelling you. Is it something outside of yourself, or is it something inside of yourself? And if integrity is what matters to you and not social acceptance or financial stability or peer pressure, then you have to be led by what's inside of you, right? And not what's outside of you. And sometimes that's going to turn out badly, by every objective worldly measure, right? Sometimes that's going to give you a fine. Sometimes that's going to put you in jail. Sometimes that's going to leave you with no friends whatsoever. And I think each of us has to decide. I don't want to say there's a right answer here. It's not like, well, if you don't pick this answer, it's wrong, but they each come with their own baggage. It's the two different paths. And I personally have decided that the path I want to walk is the one where I'm led by the thing that's inside me. And that's going to come with a lot of bumps. And over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been by friends left alone, right? They'll kind of go with you up to a point, but when the spotlight gets too hot, the pressure's too intense, they'll just kind of back away and say, well, that's not my fight. And I say, well, fair enough. That's not your choice. That's not your fight. But I feel like we've only got one life, and we're all going to get, well, God willing, we're going to get to an 80th birthday or an 85th birthday, and we're going to look back and say, there's no more potential here. There's no more what ifs. There's no more I can just do it better tomorrow. It's all hindsight stuff. It's all your history's been written, and the great, I guess, gift of life is that we get to write it the way we want. And the great burden of life is that we get to write it the way we want, right?
With a newborn baby, which in and of itself comes with an identity crisis for many women who suddenly have, you're a professional woman and then suddenly you have this baby that depends on you for everything.
Mm-hmm.
I know for myself, being able to get back to work was like a salve. I was like, okay, I know how to do this. Like this I can do, this I'm proficient at.
Mm-hmm.
I can check off the tasks and I'm done. You had quite the opposite. Like your entire world was shifted. How did you, and then on top of that, you didn't go within, you didn't just be quiet. You didn't just, stay with your newborn and, pet her about the house. You got loud.
I wish I could have.
Right? So, what was that? Was there a moral obligation, a professional obligation, just the fire that couldn't be put out? What was the driving factor to say, this is awful, this is what's happened, and now I'm going to put myself in the spotlight on state media to be crucified publicly?
Mm-hmm. I'm not maybe as brave as you think. Sometimes ignorance is masked as bravery because you don't know what's coming, right? So you put yourself in these situations and only after do you think, oh, that was quite brave of me. No, it wasn't brave. I just didn't know it was. I remember at one point, CBC called for an interview. And I thought, oh, great. We'll finally get the other side of this story. And I was driving in the car with my daughter, and I had to pull over and do this interview with this guy. And I said, okay, I can do this, but she's going to wake up any moment. And he was so lovely. And then, of course, it was exactly what you would imagine. It was just a horrible smear piece. So things like that, you step into without realizing. That's an example of the destruction of trust I was talking about, right? And I would never do that again, which I guess is savvy in a way and a honing of your intuition. But it's also sad because it means now I lead with distrust rather than trust. The default is to distrust people. And that's a great harm, right? People really need to prove. But yeah, you're right. It wasn't just losing a job. It was right away. I mean, I would be breastfeeding, try to put my daughter down for a nap, and then rush downstairs to do an interview with who knows who. But I think when you very strongly believe a truth about something, and things could have turned out exactly the same way, but if I hadn't done everything I could manage at the time, I'd be feeling very differently now, right?
Hmm. Hmm. It's interesting. I'd had experience on media, and I was contacted. Most of my friends were contacted primarily by the Toronto Star, my friends in the holistic world. And we're like, do not respond. It's like, we are going to be the punching bag and the scapegoat for everything that's not working. And thankfully, because I couldn't have handled. I was getting enough in my inbox. It's like a punch to the gut every time. Even when even when you have your convictions and you believe in what you're standing for, it's hard.
Well, because the opposition was not leading with facts. They didn't want to talk about facts. They wanted to deride your character. And so the criticism I got was usually how irresponsible as an ethics professor to be intentionally misleading people, right? That's the only possible explanation.
Hmm. How long through this process did you, I mean, you obviously had to start to kind of redefine who you are in this new world that we're all trying to figure out who we are in this new world.
Hmm.
Um, you became the ethics scholar for the Democracy Fund and wrote My Choice, the ethical case against COVID-19 vaccine mandates, which really put it all out there. So, how did you begin to redefine your purpose and how you aligned with, success in that drive, now having to also redefine what you did, how you worked?
I think there was something I got right at that time and something I got wrong. The thing I got right is that it became clear pretty quickly that there wasn't a playbook for how life was going to go now. I had to create it, I had to invent it, I had to walk paths that hadn't been mown before. I had to say things in places that hadn't been said in those places before. I'd taken the leap and there wasn't a going back. So I was okay with that. The thing I got wrong is I thought that figuring out how to do my public work and help to support people's freedom and sovereignty was just a matter of finding the right employment fit. If I just work for the right freedom-oriented person, then it would all be okay. And I did that twice, and it wasn't all okay. And I've decided now that I am, in principle, unemployable.
We all reached that place.
Maybe I was a little later than some, but, and that is both scary and beautiful because you're in this constant process of creation and generation and reflection and revision, and you're trying to figure out always how you can be of use to the world while being aware of the fact that that might look different from step to step and time to time, right?
Do you feel like you've moved through that kind of messy middle phase of figuring that out? Like, do you feel like I'm on the path now? I'm, at least for today.
Yes, ask me Friday. I don't know. But yes, I do feel that. I feel like life is always going to be different now. It astounds me still that, so we were out on Canada Day. My husband and I took our daughter to a parade, and then we went and got ice cream somewhere in this tiny little town in Ontario. And I was wearing a hat and sunglasses. And somebody came up to me and recognized me. And I remember thinking, that's it. I mean, it's kind of one thing for that to happen at the height of everything, which it did a lot, but for it still to happen, I mean, it tells you two things. One is that this is still very much at the forefront of people's minds. And secondly, that my identity will forever be connected to this moment in history. And there are days when I bemoan that. There are days when I feel like, oh, I just would like to be less of a spectacle sometimes, and less known for one of the worst moments in modern history. Like, it would be nice to be able to disentangle that.
I just got full body goosebumps because I do believe, and I hope that's the worst thing our generation lives through. I genuinely pray that that is it and it's behind us. But your video to your students that went viral, which is, I think, probably when I first saw you, you were a guiding light for so many because you were so, I mean, your way is so calm and eloquent and graceful. And I think you spoke to the hearts, whether people were going to share it or publicly admit it. You spoke to the hearts of so many people, which too few were able to do in a kind, measured way. And I don't think, I mean, I can't tell you how to think. I still, when I have people say to me, like, I love what you post on Instagram, and I know what that means. It's like the wink, like we're on the same team. I'm
They
still
wish they could do it or had the right.
yeah. But that spark is just that you had that soul connection with someone, even in the darkest time. And if I saw you in the street, I would probably say the same thing because it was so powerful for me and offered me so much hope.
The interesting thing about that is, I think at the time, and maybe even for many months after, I thought that if there was value in that, it consisted in one of two things: truth, hopefully, it was, truthful, and secondly, courage boosting. I hope that it gave people confidence to do what they were feeling in their gut anyway. But that isn't what people say when they, which is interesting. What they say is, "You made me feel like I wasn't crazy." I would say 95% of people say that. It's not surprising, but what really reaches us is stuff on an emotional level. I was feeling crazy and frenzied and destabilized and gaslit, and like my emotions were frayed. And then I saw that and saw the humanity in another person. And then all of that kind of died down for a little bit.
Right.
Right.
I just felt like, oh, wow, there's an adult in the room. Finally, there's someone here. So your decision sparked debate. Some called it courageous, some criticized your stance. How, in that period, did you learn to remain centered? Or did you figure out a way to remain centered, to continue kind of, knowing who you were through it all?
It's interesting. I do feel centered in one way, but very much not in another way, still to this day. And one has to do with integrity, and one has to do with, I think, that moral injury we talked about earlier. So one of the great things that's happened over the last several years is I feel much more, I know what my core values are and what matters so much less, So I feel very centered in terms of who I am and what matters to me and what I want life to look like, and the kind of space and environment I want to create for my daughter, things like that. But this is something people might not know. You probably wouldn't know just listening to this conversation, but I need so much more recovery time now from trying social interactions. And I get so much more annoyed so quickly. And annoyance is, for an ethics professor, annoyance is difficult, because what it means is that you recognize differences in people, and some are, you think some are better than others, and you find it hard to tolerate the ones that you think are less good. So it's very obstinate and it's not a good, and so there's a bit of an identity crisis there, because I know that my difficulty with intolerance is rooted in something that really, really bothers me from from an identity point of view. But as I was saying in my stories yesterday about moral injury, I have not found that beating myself up about it and judging myself to be effective. And what I likened it to was, think about if you had a physical injury. You tore your Achilles, you broke a bone, you had a stroke. Well, how would you handle yourself after? How would you treat yourself? Would you just make yourself go back to the baseball game? Would you get on a treadmill and run for 2 hours? Be crazy, right? Because you would just re-injure yourself, and you'd probably start to hate the activity. And you need to rest. You need to stop doing the thing that caused the injury in the first place for a while anyway. And then there might be some physio involved. I don't know what the moral equivalent of physio is. Therapy, journaling, reflection, alone, a beautiful cup of coffee. I don't know, whatever your therapy is. And then you're gradually introduce the thing that caused the problem in the first place. So I do find that I need, what motivated my stories yesterday is that I had a weekend of 3 back-to-back social events that were very challenging. And that ended up putting me on the couch for about 4 hours on Sunday afternoon. And I said, that was a mistake. That was too much, because now I'm not useful to myself or to my daughter or to my family or in any way, right? And now 2 days later, I'm starting to feel a little bit better. But I think we need to recognize the harm so that we don't gaslight ourselves, right? And be kind to ourselves and allow ourselves grace. And nobody's going to come along and fix that. It's kind of a fool's errand to be just waiting for apology, a personal one or a public one, right? And what are we going to do? Put our lives on hold until that comes? No, we need to repair the injury that was caused us, even in the absence of the injurer apologizing for it or doing anything to show a sign of amends. And it makes me sad. There are so many people who've gotten stuck there, right? I'm teaching an online ethics course right now called The Hero's Journey, and it's about integrity, building integrity through relationships, yourself, figuring out what matters most to you in life, making decisions that are in line with that. And we meet every 2 weeks, and I ask them, what's the big thing on your mind? What's the sticking point? And almost invariably it's, if only person X would Y.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. My husband and I have this conversation too, because we went through it with a lot of people who were very close. And we also live in a culture now, hopefully it's going away, where people just want to celebrate their victimization, like that their victimhood is their identity. And
Yes.
as long as you do that, you don't have to take responsibility for your circumstance, which is a very hard place to exist from.
You get stuck there.
Yeah.
Right? And it's running the same loop in the mind, the same memories, the same regrets, the same blaming language. It puts the focus on somebody else. And one of the great gifts from my academic life that was given to me was insight into the Stoic philosophers. And I didn't think of them much at the time. I have to say, when I was in grad school, they were all kind of thought of being sort of juvenile or provincial or something, but they're the ones I keep coming back to now, because they had this one great insight, which is there's two kinds of things in the world. They're the things you control, the things you can't. Focus only on the things you can control. That's probably been the biggest thing over the last 4 or 5 years that I keep coming back to, because it's often a very small number of things. But if you focus on those with consistency, that's how you're often able to start seeing some movement in your life.
Mm-hmm. I want to get to sort of where you are now in the gifts, but before we come to now, what often holds people back from any big shift in their life, whether it's their own choosing or not, like choosing to have a baby or change a job or whatever it is that you can get so focused only on what you're going to lose, because you know what you had.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know the gifts that will come after. Are there aspects that you miss, that you've lost through this awakening and pivot process, that you wish you had back in your life, or that you could do, or whatever it might be?
I don't miss my academic life at all. It feels like a gift to me that I was shown what it was. And the academic training, the education I received feels like a gift, but I don't miss that life. I don't wish I could go back. I miss the anonymity. I miss a quieter life. But I'm trying to come to terms with the fact, as we were saying before, that this is just, I'll always be connected to this moment in history. And some people are. This is what happens. Some people will always be connected to 1930s, 40s Europe. Some people will always be connected to, atrocities that happen in the South. I mean, this is how human life is. And I believe that we're chosen for different jobs that have different magnitudes and a different cadence to them, right? And some of us are chosen for, work that is not as public but endures over the course of a life. And for others of us, there are these punctuated moments, and it's not for me to choose what was given to me, but for me to choose how to respond to it. And you wake up every day hoping that you're doing the best job you can do.
Yeah. Do you see a gift in the process, like that you had more time with your daughter than you might have, or in that way?
I don't know about that. I resent the distraction. It's very hard to be, and I
Not the,
focus on it a lot.
sorry, not the distraction of your child.
No, 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 no,
Wanted to
no.
clarify.
Yes, thank you for allowing. No, no, not that. Childhood is so pure and innocent. I know it sounds cliche to say, but it's a cliche for a reason. It's like this aura of purity, and everything is so simple. And I wish I could just, over the last 5 years, have fully immersed in that. And I only have one child and not having more. And so I've missed some moments that I won't be able to get back. And I resent that. So, you're worried about her future. And part of the reason I've done this public work is to try to help to create a world that she doesn't have to face these battles. She doesn't have to worry. But the cost of that is not being able to be as present all the time as I wanted to be.
Right. I didn't want to make this about me, but I have the same feeling. I sort of wonder if all mothers have that feeling
Maybe
because
always, maybe
I don't
always.
know. Like I feel like there is always something. There's always life happening, whether it's caring for an aging parent when you have a little one, or I was back at work after 3 weeks because I had my own business, and not full time, but there was that thing. There were the people on my phone being like, what do I do with this? Or how do? I think that's one of the challenges of motherhood is navigating life with this new thing that really you optimally would be with 24 hours a day. Yeah.
Well, the cadence of motherhood and the cadence of public work are not right. They just don't mesh very well. They don't overlap well with each other. But yeah, again, that's always, I mean, the cadence of being a mother and the cadence of cooking dinner don't overlap very well with each other, right? So,
Right. Or just needing 20 minutes to yourself. Like
yeah, no,
it's
you're not allowed.
ongoing.
Yeah.
So for someone listening who feels trapped between their principles and their practical needs, like making money or being with their family or, whatever it might be, what advice do you give about how to navigate that tension of wanting to live in alignment and then having real life obligations and commitments?
I think the first thing is being really clear about whether your needs are needs or wants. Because you might find that the things you think you need are inherited beliefs and desires from your family or from culture, from a vigorous marketing scheme, whatever it is. And, I've talked to a number of people over the last several years who are afraid of losing their livelihood and who have houses worth $1.8 million and 3 cars in the driveway. And when you have a further conversation, you say, well, what would you rather give up? Would you rather keep all of that and lose your principles, or do you want to keep your principles and then what can you pare down in this life that has gotten, that's kind of increasingly getting larger? So I think figuring out, are all the things you feel you need really needs, or are some of them wants that maybe don't even come from you, right? And the second thing, which is related, is just getting very clear about what your core values are. So core values are things like adventure or creativity or happiness or relationship. So some people are totally relationship led. right? Every single thing that matters to them is having their sort of a network of people, whether it's in your family or friend group or these concentric relationship groups. I'm not a relational person primarily. On the Enneagram scale, I'm a 4, which is a hardcore individualist. And there are many great things about that, but it's also challenging in a lot of ways because you do need to work harder to build some of those bonds that would come more naturally to other people. Again, not a right or wrong way here, but you don't want to be living as a person who primarily values relationships if what you primarily value is a solitary life of creativity, or vice versa, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I'm sort of projecting. I think it's hard for people to be able to take that honest look at
Mm-hmm.
how they're allocating the resources they have in order to make those shifts. I think it can often be helpful to have someone be able to reflect it, especially when it's not your choice.
Well, a really common mistake that happens to people, I'll say, as opposed to a mistake that gets made, is most women think they're an Enneagram 2, which is the relational people person one. And often when you talk with them and ask further questions, they find that they're not so clearly a 2, that there's other things that matter to them, right? Maybe they're led by adventure or they want success. But the reason they feel drawn to saying they're a 2 is because they feel it's expected of them to be the one who supports people, right? Who nurtures people. So knowing thyself is not as easy always as it sounds.
For sure.
Yeah.
So let's say we're 4 years out, roughly for you, 4 to 5.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have a flexible year. What has ultimately surprised you the most about life after this massive pivot that was made?
I never would have guessed that we would still kind of be there now.
Ah,
Wouldn't have guessed. Yeah, that the division would be even. That I think maybe the biggest thing is that the division would be so entrenched.
mm.
You know,
What about
there's
in your own life?
I don't know what I thought. I mean, I think I was so, as you've alluded to, caught up in this bubble of this chaotic bubble of speaking about COVID and being a mother. And I was just so focused on kind of, treading water to stay afloat that I don't know if I thought about what things would look like now. So I don't have something to compare it to. Everything's been a surprise, Meghan. It's all been a surprise. What I'm doing these days, total surprise. And I just think there's something really beautiful about that. So I've kind of let go of expectations about how things should look.
Would have been the greatest gifts.
I feel very free from the burden of managing other people's reactions to what I do and say. And I hope I'm not sort of careless about that. It's not that I want to go around saying terrible things about people and, come what may and hurting their feelings. It's not that. But we generally spend a lot of time, exert an awful lot of emotional energy managing people's expectations of and disappointments in us. And when we let that go, we have a lot more time, a lot more energy, and we can live as we think we ought to, right?
Hmm. I should have asked this earlier, but I'm going to ask it now. And if it's too personal, you can say so. Has your husband been along on this journey with you entirely?
Not entirely, no. But we're both, I would say, very thoughtful, respect-oriented people. And so conversation is possible, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So you've said that you wouldn't go back. You don't miss that life.
No.
What are you, I mean, you are with your daughter most of the time. Is she homeschooled? Is she with you most? Yeah. How are you enjoying that?
Hmm. Well, it's funny because you would think teaching university, the subject matter that would be way harder. Teaching a 3, 4, 5 year old is way harder than teaching at university. Everything is emotional, right? You're always kind of managing frustration, expectation, boredom, endurance, perfectionism. I mean, there are all these things that you don't deal with as much when you have a 19 to 22-year-old group of people, right? They a little less so now, but when I taught, for the most part, they could sit and listen to you,
Right.
for the most part. And the one thing, I mean, I know this isn't really about homeschooling, but the one thing I've learned, and I'm glad I learned it as quickly as I did, is that teaching a young person is so much not about the factual left-brained things, right? And so much of early childhood education is about getting that perfectly curated wall of Montessori toys and getting the monthly, what are they called? The monthly educational boxes, and making sure they learn to read when they're 2 and making sure they can do STEM, whatever that stands for, you know? And but what I have seen in my own daughter, and they're all different, but what really makes a big difference to her is to have someone there who is warm and continuous in care and nurtures creativity and curiosity. And I think you can learn as much outside looking for snails as inside doing a phonics book, right? Especially when you're young. And it would be so easy to obliterate the love for learning at that age, like when you're 4, and have them just say, I don't want to do this ever again because it's not fun. Not that it's all about fun. It's not fun, right? It's that you want them to feel, you can tell when they're excited and they're enriched and they're curious about life and want to know more versus they're just kind of shriveling and shutting down and absorbing a minimal amount because they have to. But you want their ideas to lead, and then you can help to nurture them and fill in the blanks rather than seeing their little brains as kind of an open vat that you pour stuff into, right?
Absolutely. My son is 8. He's in Montessori. And what
Oh
we
dear, I didn't mean to. I think Montessori is wonderful in a lot of
no, I didn't take it. I didn't take it like that at all. It's very curiosity based and it aligns for him because he does do really well with routine and schedule. And I would not be great as a full-time homeschooler of this child. Like every child is different. He is highly social and wants people around all the
ways.
time.
Mhm,
I am not.
mhm.
What I found interesting is that similar to what you're saying, we're trying to keep that. We're just, our goal as parents is to keep his spark alive. Like,
Yes.
do not let that spark become extinguished. So, always nurturing that curiosity and that creativity. And now that he's 8 years old and he's sort of quote unquote out in the world more with
Mhm.
regular children and learning to navigate those things on his own, and whether it's birthday party food or just you know parents and families who live differently, he's old enough that we can see the critical thinking being put to work now, where he now has that capacity to think things through. He's very pragmatic, which makes me laugh because I'm not. But it works. Like if you can keep that spark of curiosity and creativity alive in your child, no matter who your child is, I think what we all want, those of us who've, been through this in any capacity, is that they never forget who they are and
Yeah.
how to think and ask questions.
But it's also very humbling because you're just kind of going by the seat of your pants and you never know the questions. It's, well, mommy, what color was this dinosaur's tusk? And you think, hold on, hold on. And the next day it'll be about how does this seed grow? And the next day it's about how do frogs mate? And I don't know, hold on.
Yeah, we are at the stage where he's like, no, no, mommy, you're wrong. This is, I'm like, oh, okay. I said it with confidence, but I was wrong.
Like, possible.
So if you could go back and tell your younger self who's just starting the academic career about what was coming, or if you want to teach that person about, what true courage and conviction and ethics are, how would you explain that?
Well, I don't think I would tell my younger self what was about to happen because I'd be afraid she would back away, being so worried about it. But I would just say, pick your path and hold your course.
So you're grateful that you went through that fire.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But I worry sometimes that if I had maybe not been as tired and I had seen it coming, that I would have shied away from it more. I do worry about that.
Well, you don't have to because you didn't, because it happened. I sort of feel like I wasn't in a I was self-employed, and when it's in your heart and you see these violations of people's rights happening, and again, I was not anti anything except the actual mandate. Um, I liken it to, seeing an oncoming train and trying to yell for people to get off the tracks and your voice not coming. Um,
Well, and what's worse is the people on the tracks, they finally hear you and they say, no, no, I want the train to run over me. And they're like, oh, okay, I won't waste my breath.
right. But we keep wasting our breath somehow. It doesn't feel like a waste in the moment.
No, it doesn't.
So ultimately, I suspect, unfortunately, people are going to keep recognizing you because of the role you played. How ultimately would you want to be remembered or thought of, or not at all?
I hope that more than people being grateful for what I did, that it gives people more courage to live the way they really want to live and peel back all the layers of expectation and pretense and worries about how the world will react. One thing you learn in life is that other people aren't thinking about you as much as you think they are, you know? And we worry a lot about how other people will react and what they think about us. And in reality, they're trying to figure out how they're going to get to the grocery store and get home again. And, they're worried about their own expectations other people have of them. So I just hope that people know that it's a choice how you want to live, but it feels very different. Your life will be very different depending on what choice you make. And being stuck in that place of indecision is itself a choice,
Mm-hmm.
right?
What is it that you're doing now that's in alignment with who you are now?
Very surprised. Everybody thinks I'm crazy. What's new? So I'm in the process of getting licensed to be a financial broker, which is so shocking because I was the person who, in high school, I remember in grade 10, we could take accounting. And I think, why would you want to do that when you could take art? It was just no interest in it whatsoever. But what I figured out is that over the last several years of talking about freedom and autonomy and how you got to make your own choices and all the things we've been saying today, is that the response I would very commonly get is, well, that's all well and good, Julie, but that's not an option. I don't have financial freedom. I don't have, and on top of that, I've been talking about a lot of the corruption and regulatory capture in medicine, healthcare. Well, the same thing has been going on in the big banks. And I wouldn't be doing this if it was all doom and gloom. If the only thing you could do here was bring to light how we've been used and how we're being kept poor by the big banks and the banking system and our financial illiteracy, and which I think is very deeply cultural and intentional. There are very good solutions. And there are solutions that can put people in a position, especially if you start young, of financial freedom. So yesterday, I just completed the process of, this is going to sound kind of shocking and maybe odd in the context of this conversation, but basically with one application, made my daughter a multimillionaire by the time she's 65. And I did that not because I want her to be able to buy all kinds of stuff, and not because I don't want her to live a life of purpose and work, because that's important as well, but because I never want her to be in the position I was in. And I was very lucky because my husband had a very good job. And part of the reason I objected to the mandate is because I knew I could. And a lot of people weren't in that position. But I mean, I unfortunately, I think that is going to be part of our future moving forward, that we're going to be put in positions where we have to choose between our livelihood and our principles. And if we can help our children to be more financially free, they will have more life options and be less likely to be in those compromising positions. So this is, to me, I know from the outside, it probably looks like a crazy pivot, right? But to me, it feels very much in alignment because I'm still talking about freedom and autonomy. I just have the skill now to help people achieve that practically.
My definition of the courageous pivot has been when you have to do something or want to do something that's in alignment with your heart and looks absolutely crazy to everyone
From the
else.
outside. Mm-hmm.
So you've checked that box because, the way you've explained it, it's a perfectly cohesive next step. I released a money course last year as well because of that very same reason that if we don't figure out our finances, we remain trapped in a life where we are not able to execute on our life's purpose, where
We're
we get
always
stuck.
going to be beholden to somebody else and their ideas of what counts as a good life and their ideas of what you should be doing to be a good, not just employee, but a good person, a good citizen. And the ultimate freedom is being able to make those choices for yourself.
Yeah. And I see the importance too in reframing what it means to be a wealthy person, that it's not the root of all evil and tax the rich like a punishment, but it is a powerful ticket to freedom to be able to use your time in profoundly powerful ways.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, where can listeners go to find you and your work?
I'm most active on Instagram these days, and it's Dr. Julie Ponesse. I respond to messages most frequently there. You can also go to my website, julieponesse.com, and there are links there to my books and past interviews and my course, The Hero's Journey, and things like that. And if anybody wants help with the financial piece, I'm really working hard on that, and I'm very excited because we're just seeing big moves in people's lives. People are able to leave jobs that are kind of making their lives difficult. So they're able to create stability for their family and their future. And they're not very difficult moves. In many cases, it's just fine tuning here and there. So don't feel, if you're listening to this, please don't feel like you have no options because you feel like you have no options because you've been told you have no options, right? And that's the place that we're meant to be kept. And we have to proactively unlearn that lie if we're going to create freedom in our lives.
Well, that feels like a really beautiful place to conclude. Any last final thoughts, or are you good?
I'm good. And thank you, Meghan, so much for this. These conversations we live in this deep culture of silence. We're not supposed to speak. We're not supposed to articulate ideas. We're not supposed to have, humanity exist between ourselves. And so every time there's a conversation like this that's public, that other people can hear, it means a lot. So thank you.
I hope you enjoyed my conversation with Julie. As I mentioned in the show, we do have Money Mastery still available. If this is something you want to dive into, this is a great place to start. So you can go to courageouspivot.com, scroll down, and you'll see Money Mastery with a discount code available. Many of the topics that Julie and I went into are still sensitive, soft spots for a lot of people. It touches on what was a very, very traumatic period of our lives. And as I said in the show, hopefully that's as bad as it gets. But I also trust that we do now have a new level of resilience and hopefully a new alignment with our own hearts, that should we encounter these challenges, whether of our own doing in making these courageous pivots or something that is happening outside of ourselves, that we do have that muscle now strengthened to find our way through while staying in alignment with our hearts. I hope you're enjoying the Courageous Pivot podcast. Here's what you can do to help me support this show. Head over to Substack and hit the subscribe button. You can also subscribe on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. You could also leave a comment or a review. Your engagement is very, very helpful to keep this show going. We currently do not have any sponsors, so it's just your support that allows me to know that I'm on the right path, that it is touching you, that it is beneficial, and that you are gaining value from what I'm sharing here and the people I'm sharing with you. Thank you, as always, for joining. Again, grateful to you for being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we will see you next week.